Welcome, everyone, to our monthly edition of the Undocumented Migration Project webinar series, where we are bringing you conversations with musicians, writers, anthropologists, museum curators, and a host of other interesting people who are working in the arts and in issues related to migration, to poverty, to representation, et cetera, et cetera. And in a lot of ways, this is just a way for me to bring together people that I think are really amazing so that we can have interesting and potentially scary live conversations on the internet. My guest today is by far one of my favorite singer-songwriters and novelists, uh, the great Willy Vlautin from Reno, Nevada, now relocated after for many years in Portland, Oregon. Willy is the lead singer and primary songwriter for the Portland, Oregon-based band Richmond Fontaine. He's also the guitarist and songwriter for the other Portland-based band, the Delines. In addition, Willy is the author of 6 novels, including the books Lean on Pete and Motel Life, both of which have been made into films recently, as well as the forthcoming novel, which will be released in April, The Night Always Comes. Um, I came to know Willy, and I think he's heard me tell this story before. I moved to Seattle in 2008 from Pennsylvania. And at that time, I didn't know anything really about the Pacific Northwest other than, that was where grunge came from. And also, I knew that the band Richmond Fontaine lived near Seattle. I sort of came to know Richmond Fontaine when I was in graduate school, and I remember the first time I heard um, the album Post to Wire. It was like encountering music that sort of did all these things for me at once. It was this kind of rich storytelling, but storytelling that really, for me, struck a nerve. Writing about characters and about experiences that, for me, were very familiar, were close to home, and also incredibly fascinating, and delivered with such a sort of an amazing literary flair. All of this, against the backdrop of Americana music, and so I really just sort of fell in love with Richmond Fontaine. um, I then had someone send me a message or an email that said, "Hey, I just picked up this book called Motel Life. You might really like it. It's pretty fucked up. It seems like it's right up your alley." And that was when I realized that the lead singer from Richmond Fontaine also was writing books. So then I got sort of doubly excited. And when I moved to Seattle, I didn't have many aspirations other than the fact that I was going to find a way to make Willy hang out with me. So I invited him to come and speak to my class. I had students read his book, and we went and drank a bunch of beers and listened to some music, and I guess the rest has been history. So it's really exciting for me to have Willy here. He's one of my biggest heroes. He's got this new amazing book that is about to come out that I'm excited to talk to him about. So without further ado, welcome, Willy.
Hey, thanks for having me. It's good to see your face, man.
I know. It's been a while.
Yeah.
Um, so how is your pandemic going?
I mean, for me, it's pretty lucky because I live 30 miles north of Portland and I live in the woods. And so it doesn't feel like the end of the world is coming. And it's the longest I've been off the road in 23 years or something like that. So all I get to do is I just ride ride all day, and I got a new dog. So I mean, I feel bad, but it's been kind of all right.
And so has the pandemic at all changed your approach to writing?
No, not really. You know what it is? I've always been kind of an agoraphobe. Like I've always struggled socially, and it's definitely reverting me back to when I was like in high school age, where I had trouble just going to a store. It's got me a little bit like that. But in general, it's usually writing a novel. I'll pull off it for months at a time. Maybe I'll write for a month, go on the road for a month, and then have to do something else, and then I get to go back to the novel. So I'm starting and stopping and starting and stopping, and with this, I can just start a novel and finish it. So it's been pretty nice that way.
Do you find that you need the travel to and the kind of getting away from the book, is that helpful, or are you finding that with having more kind of concentrated time now, you're able to focus more?
Well, that's true. You know, like the only thing I think I'm good at in writing novels is that it's a grind, and I don't mind digging the ditch of it. I'm not that good at it, so sometimes you're right. Sometimes the space gives you enough time to figure out the puzzle of it. Where like some guys can write a pretty decent novel in one or two drafts, and me it takes a long time because I make a lot of mistakes along the way. Uh, I might not be the smartest guy in the world, so you're right. Like sometimes taking a little break from it, and then you come back to it, and you forget why you did what you did, and you realize, man, you were going down a wrong path. So you're right. It does kind of help you get distance from it, and then you come back and you might approach it differently.
I mean, I'm only asking because as I'm also trying to write stuff, and I feel like I don't have a place to escape to go do something else.
Yeah.
It's like I can go to a different room or I can watch TV, but it's I miss like I need to clear my head for a week and then come back and revisit stuff, and it's more like it's haunting. It's sitting there and it knows that that I need to get back to it right now. I don't really have a choice.
And that's a hard thing too when you're like wearing the same suit. Like sometimes when you take a break, it's like you come back wearing a different suit, looking at it from a different angle a little bit. Or maybe you go through a phase like you're in a certain headspace, you're editing a certain way, your ideas are just geared towards one aspect of the story, and then you take a break and you come back and you're either happier, sadder, more beat up or less beat up. And the distance, I think, is one of the most fun things about writing a novel. Is it's not a performance. You just you can keep pulling back and analyzing it, and every dent in it you can kind of hopefully undent eventually if you don't give up. And
Yeah.
for me, that's why I love the novel more than anything. As an art form, I think it's the most beautiful, and one of the most powerful. But in writing them, I like it the most because it's like buying a bad car. I always say, no one needs to know that you bought a lemon because you can keep fixing it until nobody knows it's a lemon. And just because it takes you 3 years to fix it, where another guy can fix it in 6 months, it doesn't really matter because no one needs to know how much effort you put into it.
Well, I think one of the best pieces of advice that anyone's ever given me about writing came from you, and you said to me once, I think we were talking about like the paralysis of writing, and you said something to me like, you can't fix a train wreck if you don't have a wrecked train. So go wreck you need to go wreck a train
Yeah,
first, and
yeah,
then fix it up.
yeah. And I think you need to have a story that can beat uh, your unconfidence. Like I need a story that like, cause I'll go and do, yeah, I guess to start off, like confidence has always been my big problem throughout life. And so I need to write a story that I don't care if I'm good or bad at it, but I really want to tell that story. I want to disappear into that world. And then you're right. And then at the end of a year or two, you have a 10 car pileup that you need to fix. But if the story is strong enough to keep you in it, and for you to disappear into it, then it's just heaven, I think.
So what is like a normal writing day for you look like? Could you walk us through kind of what's your process?
I mean, I don't really, I learned, well, I guess, I started writing novels when I was 18, 19 for fun, just strictly for escapism. Now, the stories were really messed up. And I was pretty naive. I had a big edge on me, as a kid, and I didn't deal with any of it. And so I just wrote these really fucked up stories all the time, really messed up songs, and I knew they were dark, and I didn't know why. And so I wrote 17, 18, 19, and then kind of really started getting into it in my early 20s. And so I just got up before work, like drinking Red Bull before work and trying to ride, or trying to ride at night. So I learned early on you gotta be able to ride anywhere. You got to be able to ride in your car if that's all you've got a chance to do, or if you have an hour here or there. you have to take it and write. So I don't really have a process. I just, if I get the time, um, I just get up in the morning because I'm smarter. I'm as smart as I get in the morning. And I just try to write until somebody tells me I can't anymore. Like your life gets in the way, right?
Yeah.
So I don't really have a process. I mean, I always try. I had a lot of tricks when I first started, but I don't use them as much now. But I think the best trick is you just have a story that, regardless of if you're good enough to tell it, you want to be there regardless of if it's a failed project too. Like I write failed novels that I don't show anybody, but I still like being in that world.
Yeah.
Um, so I guess as fiction writer, I always think of it as digging a ditch. Like you can't really get particular when you have to dig a ditch. You're just digging a ditch, and you have to pick a direction and go. And it's slow and it's kind of a drag. And so, but it takes a long fucking time. So I can't get too precious about process, you know. So
And so then what does editing look like for you?
editing's where it's fun, you know. I That's back to what I was saying. Like you don't have to be good. You just have to figure out the puzzle. And you have to figure out like how do I make myself look good? Like it's like if you're looking in the mirror and you're like, man, I look like a wreck. And you're like, well, what can I do to fix this so it's presentable kind of thing? And you just sit there and you try to figure it out. And so editing is heaven to me. Like, so what I'll do is I'll write a novel in about a year or so, first draft. And then I'll spend 2 years or 3 years editing it. And I might go through the thing, like tear it apart and rebuild it 7 or 8 times. And then I'll go through it another 10 times, fixing sentences. Or I go through a whole draft just fixing one guy. And then by fixing one guy, it messes up the balance of all the other guys. And so I got to fix their balance, and then it just goes back and forth. So editing to me is heaven. It's not emotionally taxing. It's just tinkering.
Yeah.
The first drafts are the toughest for me because they're emotionally taxing, and they mess up your head. And I buy in. You know, I write about the stories I write about because there's something in them that's keeping me up at night or worrying me or scaring me. So the first drafts are taxing, and editing is it's like figuring out a puzzle.
And so, well, I will get more when we talk about the new book about the editing process for that. I want to also just say, people who are watching live, we're starting to get questions already coming in. So if you have questions for Willy about stuff, please submit them
Oh, yeah.
on our Facebook page, and we'll get to those towards the end. Let's see here. I guess I had a question too about, you know, the characters and the stories, and about, I guess number one, early on, I think about like early Richmond Fontaine songs like "Trembling Leaves," which, there's like some real fucked up songs that I think are really really amazing, and I've always wondered, like, what are the influences for that? Were there people that you were reading or listening to who were sort of striking a chord with, like, I'm kind of going, I know we've talked about Bukowski and we've talked about others, but are there any other folks who are sort of inspiring this early writing style and these themes?
I mean, I think growing up in Reno, I was always attracted to, you know, I mean, Reno's got a lot of different sides to it. Like my mom would never even go near the casinos, but I was drawn to the more alcoholic side to it. And it had a segment of society that was just lived in motels, and it was mostly men. I used to stay at this hotel that had a balcony, and I'd stay on, like, 20 floors up or whatever, and you could look out. And if you got up early, like at around 8, you could see all of downtown, and you could watch all these men. And it was back then, it was all, so this is like early 90s, mid 90s. It was all men going to the bars and casinos from like 8 in the morning on. You'd see literally hundreds of them. And I used to rent a room at this motel called the Gold Dust West. And I used to write there sometimes. And I had a notebook by me that would count degenerate alcoholic men. And, in 1 hour, once I counted 65 different dudes walking by the motel, right? And I was really attracted to them because I thought I would end up there. and I was really excited to just give up before I began, and I was also really scared of it. But I really thought I was going to be like that. So that says a lot about me as a young, and I felt that way from say 15, 16 or something. And so that says a lot about me, I guess, and why I'm interested in the stories I'm interested in. And then and so I started following writers that were like that. And I think the guy that really struck a serious nerve with me, that wasn't like Bukowski to me, was kind of like a fantasy, but the guy that really stuck a knife in me emotionally was Raymond Carver, because he wrote stories about just being a failed man, like an alcoholic failed guy that let everybody down. It wasn't like being a rebel like Bukowski. It was more like, no, you just your wife's work managing Denny's, and you wrecked a car again, or you fucked up. You can't hold a job, and you have kids. And and when I read him, I said, oh man, you could write stories about people like that, and and it doesn't have to be romantic like Bukowski. It's just like you're trying to be a good guy, but you're not a good guy. You're trying to keep a job, but you just lost the job. So when I read him, I was 20, and I was living in a garage apartment with in my girlfriend's parents' house, and they thought I was a bum because I didn't have a job, and I stayed in bed all day in the garage reading Raymond Carver, and it was like uh, somebody just stomped on me, and because I felt so much like those characters, and it was not a good feeling at all. But after that, I was like, well, man, I can write those stories. And then I guess I was 20 then or something, and I was just obsessed after that to write my own version of those stories.
And so with like Richmond Fontaine, um, I've always been really interested in how the so many of the songs are just these like novellas, right? There's just these character sketches, and then some of them end up becoming incorporated into the books later on. Could you talk a little bit about maybe the songwriting process in terms of like these sort of the storytelling and how it connects up with someone like Raymond Carver?
Well, yeah, I mean, I grew up with like like Springsteen and Tom Waits, and like I have my high school Pogues poster behind me, because they made you disappear. They told stories that were like romantic, like the Pogues would tell these crazy stories set in Ireland. Bruce Springsteen would tell crazy stories set in New Jersey, and Tom Waits would tell these crazy carnivals kind of stories. So for me, it was all about not living where I was living. So I loved story songs by freaks, by damaged people. So when I wrote in high school and stuff, like songs in high school, I was trying to be cool. I was trying to write like X songs. I was trying to write really catchy, kind of like, the world's a mess, it's in my kiss. And I just would I'd stay up all night trying to write those kind of songs, and I just couldn't come up with I couldn't come up with uh, Johnny Hit and Run Pauline, or the phone's off the hook, but you're not. I just could never come up with those lines. And then when I started reading Raymond Carver, and I just started writing songs with no choruses, and I just started writing, and I was getting darker, like I was starting to admit who I was, and so my mind was getting darker, and so I just said, I don't care, I'm not good at this anyway. I have a shitty voice, so I'm going to write songs that don't have a chorus and aren't hit. They're just going to be these masses of like of what I'm interested in, little stories and dark stories, because I was struggling, so much that they came out like that.
Well, I mean, I think for me, one of the things that's so powerful about both the songwriting and the novels is, you know, just the attention to detail that you have. And they're little things that I think that are for me are always so striking. And it's it's in a lot of ways, kind of ethnographic, where you're giving us kind of the big picture of something, or a picture of this particular moment, but then you're also honing in on a few things that in just like three, like very much like Raymond Carver, where in 3 or 4 words he can convey all this kind of stuff and all this meaning. And so I'm really curious about like where those details come from. And I'm thinking like so I read the night always. I stayed up really late last night because I couldn't put the book down. So I've started it and finished it last night. Um, and I was thinking about, there's little details in there like where he drinks beer out of a coffee cup at work. I just thought that that's a great little detail. I think about casino lights where at the end the little girl's dragging a suitcase by a piece of rope. Um, what's another one? I think it's Wake Up Ray, where it's like she hates the way that I eat. There's all
Yeah.
these little things that I think are so amazing, and I'm just wondering, like, do you? And it kind of reminds me of I was reading a Jason Isbell interview once where he said something like, my family around me is always like, watch what you say about in front of him because it'll end up in a song. But I'm just wondering, like where these little details for you sort of come from. Are you keeping a notepad about this stuff, or like where does that stuff come from?
I mean, in general, I think it's because if you get the right detail, um, then maybe the person believes it. So like if you have a song and you have the right detail, just one line that makes you believe what they're saying, then you've got them in the world. And so for me, again, because I wasn't, and I'm not that great with the English language, I have to pick and choose my battles and try to suck you in a different way. Um, and so I wait and I just tinker on the right image to suck you in, the right line that'll make you believe that this really happened. And I do that with songs a lot. I'll do it strictly so you buy into it. It's like the Jason Isbell song where he talks about Frigidaire parts on
Yeah.
Outfit, right?
Yeah.
That's a brilliant song, but like when he gets to Frigidaire parts, like that his dad was going to try to not be a house painter and go to school to be a Frigidaire repairman or whatever, then I buy into it because I was like, who would have come up with that? Like that, like, and you can imagine laying up at night trying to remember Frigidaire parts out of a catalog and falling asleep and wanting to kill yourself because you're like, Jesus, is this worse than painting? And so I bought into that song. So I just look for the right details. Yeah, sometimes I'll write them in a notebook, or they just stick out to me, or they just come to me. But I generally never use anything like a tick of anybody that's close to me uh, at all. I never write anybody else's story that's close to me because my mom was so anti me being a writer and novelist, and she was so scared of me saying bad things about her that I blanket. I just blanket. I change it. So if I wanted to be mean to an old lady, I would make her a 15-year-old boy. You know what I mean? Or
Yeah.
or I'd make your ex-girlfriend would be a 60-year-old obese truck driver, and I could say basically the same things.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
And so, like, those characters, um, and you've just created so many, just a rich array of characters, so many characters that have always sort of stuck with me, including in the new book. Where do those folks come from? Are they composites of people that you know? Are they, is that dialogue from conversations that you've had with people?
I mean, I guess it depends. Usually I write on themes. Like I'll have big themes behind it. So like my first novel, The Motel Life, I was really interested in how do you be a respectable, in that case, a man, because it's about two brothers. How do you stand up and be a decent person when you've spent your whole life not ever trying to stand up for yourself? Because it's really hard to stand up and it's hard to try and it's hard to be accountable. And then all of a sudden, these two brothers have to be accountable and they don't really know how to. So I was really interested in that because I was struggling with that. And then, like Northline, it was just bigger themes. I was really interested in weakness, how men and women are weak in different ways, and they punish themselves in different ways, and how racism plays into that, and how that looks if you're a weak person, how that plays out differently for men and women. So it's like that. And then Lean on Pete was you know, I was breaking up with horse racing because I'm just too thin skinned and I love horses. And so I write like that in these bigger themes. More than anything, it's that starts it. And then I just start picking up characters along the way that fit it. And in those instances, yeah, like in the Lean on Pete, you know, I just kind of do composites of different guys I'd met at the track for years, or like in Northline, just like weird kind of skinhead guys I knew, vaguely knew. And usually it's just the people that you don't know. It's like you see a woman walking down the street that's like missing two fingers, right? And she's like 20 pounds overweight and she's got a real wrinkled face, like she lived in Arizona most of her life or whatever. And you see her walking down the street in St. John's here in Portland, and there's just something in her eyes that make you never forget her. Or you could hang out with your buddy, some guy you work with every night after work for a year, say drinking beers, and you can't remember his name.
Yeah.
But that one woman you see her walking down the street and it just hits you.
Yeah.
There's something there, and I don't know what that is, but there's certain people I just see that just really hurt me in a real way.
Well, do you remember that time when we were in Arizona and we were eating breakfast outside in Arivaca, and there was a guy barbecuing who had like a chef hat on with like shooting range orange goggles on, and he just walked over for like a minute, 2 minutes, told a story about watching someone jump out of an airplane, and the parachute didn't open and they exploded, and he's smoking a joint and his mean wife is there, and then it was just some crazy story, and then he walks away. It was like a 2 minute interaction. um, and I don't know if that's just because I was with you and maybe you would attract those characters, or it was more meaningful because the two of us were at the same time being like, what the fuck. But yeah, I mean, it's those, like, I love those encounters, and I just feel like your work, um, you know, there's always the kind of development of the main characters, but then you'll give us these little side windows that are just super super fascinating, and you know, really add so much to the narrative.
I think like I love those kind of stories more than anything, and that was one of the hard things about not going to the horse track anymore. Is I couldn't be around those kind of guys. I guess really, in one way, my life's always been like I'm on the edge of either side. Like I like hanging out with those kind of people, but I don't want to be one of those people. And so I'm always kind of pulling myself towards like being just a straight, you know, in bed, you know, like they say, if you're going to be an alcoholic over after 50, you should learn how to drink during the day. And by happy hour, you should be locked in your house watching TV. So I have a side of me that really is scared of that stuff. And then a side of me that really wants to be that. And I think, you know, my whole life's been that way, of being scared I was going to be a bum and trying really hard not to be a bum, but hanging out with bums. So
Yeah. Well, I just, you know, I mean, I think we share. I mean, I'm addicted to it. It's like I'm so fascinated by it. I want to get really close to it, because it's funny. You know, life is just so ridiculous and hilarious. And I think I thrived so much as a young person on like danger, you know, and just laughing my ass off about the ridiculousness of stuff. But then it gets kind of old when you're in your, you know, 40s and 50s.
Well, you're tougher. You know, I think you're mentally tougher than me. Sometimes I can't, if I if I'm around that too much, it starts dragging me down too hard,
No.
and and not in a good way. And so I think a lot of my time is trying to like shore up the side of me that's going to survive. Where I think you, at least from afar, it seems like you're just tougher and cooler, and you can dip into it, and you have more swagger. Where I'm a little more like, I don't know if I'll get out of the situation. But that's how I've always admired that about you. I wish I was more like that. You have that more journalistic uh, uh, strength to you, and confidence to you. It seems like you can get into these different situations and see them for what they are. Because you're right, life in itself is ridiculous. We're a horrible species, that are, like I think Twain said, once you realize and accept that we're nuts, then it all makes sense. And I think about that all the time, and I think he's right. I think once you realize that nothing makes sense, and it's just crazy, then it can be really fun. I struggle with that though, or I think you've always been, it seems at least from a distance, you've always been I so much better at that. I really admire what you do, and how you can kind of infiltrate worlds and dangerous worlds and kind of just learn about them. I would, I always wish I was more like that.
Well, I think it does get, for me, it has gotten harder, I mean, because it's like you sort of get, the closer, I think the older I've gotten and the closer I get to certain things, you just realize that, like, it's not a game. The thing, and I think for me, I've had to, as an anthropologist, just be hyper aware of, like, the great privilege I have to, like, get close to these things, you know, write about it, and then I can walk away from it, and trying to be, you know, um, thoughtful and aware of that, and rather than being just sort of parasitic and extractive, figuring out other ways, am I writing about these things because I just like hanging out with fucked up dudes, or am I writing about these things because I like hanging out with fucked up dudes, I'm pretty good at hanging out with fucked up dudes, but then I also, come to care about these people, and I hope that I can, at the other end of it, come out and maybe make you care about these people a little bit, like I do. um
Yeah, I'm a lot like that. I mean, I think I battle with it so much, like being around someone that's damaged, dented, or going through something tough. I feel way more comfortable. Like I feel way more at home around people that are dented than I do around people that aren't. Um, but that also, but also, it's dangerous for me to hang out with them too much because I'm not strong enough to not succumb to whatever bullshit's going on. So yeah, I'm attracted to it, and I think in my novels, I do try to always write about things or people that are really struggling because there's two reasons. One is I feel like I could spend 2 years with them because they're things that I struggle with, or people that I know. And then the other one is it just makes you feel less alone. Like if somebody's going through something really rough, or you're going through something really rough, if you write a novel with them in it, you can kind of hold their hand in a way. And the other weird thing about writing really rough stories is it takes the anxiety away of life. If you're writing about something that really scares you while you're writing it, the while you're actually doing the work, that all fear goes away because you're inside the story it's really happening. And so in a weird way, it gives me a break from myself, which is great. So maybe that's why I've always been attracted to that rougher kind of side, attracted to it, and hoping to God I don't end up like that, and kind of wishing I still did though.
I mean, were those the folks that you hung out with, as a kid? Some of those characters.
I mean, when I was about 17, I was pretty straight. My mom was real, a single working class mom who was really scared that she always would say stuff like, if we don't watch out, we're going to live in the car. So don't fuck around. No one's going to take care of you. Don't fuck around. Just grind. She goes, Will, the best you can ever hope for is grind out a government job for 30 years. So you have a pension that, get it. If you can pass your civil servants, like get on with the post office, just grind it out. That's all you can do. There was that side of me. And then there was the watching those kind of drifter guys, and they weren't like homeless guys. They were like the old school drifter guys, like Harry Dean Stanton,
Yeah.
like that kind of guy in spades in Reno. And then once I started drinking, like 16, 17, I'm from a really hard drinking family. And when I started drinking around 17, I started like feeling good. You listen to music and you get drunk and you're like, all the pain in your life goes away. And then I was like, man, this is life for me. I'm gonna hang out with these bombs. And then where they gave up before they even started. So, I'm 17, 18, hanging out in like an old man's bar, talking to like what I guess would be a 40-year-old guy who you think's really cool because he's been in prison, or he's gotten fired from 5 jobs and he lives above the place in like a room. And there's a romance to it, but also like a pressure release. You're like, oh man, it's not so bad. I could be like this guy. It's not, minus the prison.
Yeah.
You know, I could keep a job. You know, so I have my ambitions. You know, and maybe I'd get a room with a bath and a toilet, and so I was already upgrading my bum status, and also I was really scared of living in my car because my mom was right. She's like, you got to bust your ass, and no one's ever gonna take care of you. So watch out, man. The life can be a bitch, and it's nice to have live in a place that has a nice kitchen and a bathroom that works and a heater that works. It's a lot nicer than fucking around for your life and living in a car. And you're like, pretty basic.
All right, I want to get to the new book. I saw a little promo you did, I think, for like the Librarian Association video, which I love it, where you just said basically, if you read the last book, this one's not gonna fucking bum you out as much as Don't Skip Out on Me will. And it's true. Like I said, I picked up the book at 9 o'clock last night, and I finished it at 1 a.m. this morning, and just I couldn't put it down. It's a very fast paced for you. And I don't know, I think the last time we spoke by phone, we talked a little bit about Jim Thompson. And you were recommending some books for me. One of the things you said to me was, I love being able to read a book in one, like books that I can read in one sitting, just like, they read almost like a screenplay. And The Night Always Comes really, for me, felt like one of the reasons I didn't want to put it down was I was like, well, okay, shit's about to get worse. What's going to happen next? And so I really, I thought that the pacing was great, and it's similar and different to previous works. I'm wondering if you can just talk a little bit about, and even at the end, you say in the acknowledgments, this is a short little book that took a long time to write. I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about that.
I mean, I did. In my early 20s, I walked into a bookstore that had a picture of a cowboy, like a deranged looking cowboy, black and white, life size. And he had like a gun, and he looked like Dennis Hopper, like on a bad trip, like a really nasty, weird dude. And in his stomach had all these books, and the books were from Black Lizard Press, and it was Jim Thompson, David Goodis, and Charles Willeford, and they were these kind of pulp writers in the 30s, 40s, 50s era, and they wrote about like 150-page novels about really psychologically damaged people doing bad things or trying not to do bad things. And they weren't like basic crime novels. They weren't like a formulaic, like a John Grisham kind of novels. These were really weird guys, dark guys writing really intense short novels. And I loved them because I was on this ride with them, and it wasn't formulaic, and it was about really struggling people. And so I'd always wanted to write that. And when I was thinking about The Night Always Comes, I was thinking about a couple of things. One was gentrification, because Portland is gentrifying at such a rapid rate. And also, as you see, housing prices quadruple in 15 years. You're also seeing tent cities pop up. And then I started thinking about Trump saying, the point is you can't be too greedy. And I started thinking about if the trickle down theory is right, like, right, the rich guys will give the poor people the money that trickles down. Then how does greed, and if that's seen as good, and the president, the head guy of the whole nation, says greed's good, how does greed look at working class levels? Like, if you were going to like let the bottom people get super greedy, how does that look? So I was trying to talk about gentrification and greed. And then, so those were my big themes. And then I wanted to set it against like a dysfunctional family, because most families obviously are dysfunctional, and it's harder when you don't have money, and it's harder when you don't have a good job to be optimistic about your future. So I wanted all those themes, but I wanted it really fast and intense. That being said, I wrote another half of it where it was a lot slower. Like she got out of the situation and left town, and it changed. So I spent 2 years on 200 pages of another book that another side of that book that didn't work, which was the same thing with Don't Skip Out on Me. I cut half of it out. So I'd take a I'd take some wrong turns,
Yeah.
and it's like being in a bad relationship. You leave the good relationship, you leave the good part of the novel alone. You don't pay attention to it. In the bad relationship, bad part of the novel, you spend 2 years pulling your hair out, jogging, doing yoga. I went through the whole gamut of self-help and vitamins and like, please, Jesus, let me be smarter so I can figure this shit out.
Yeah. Is it hard to let go of those parts?
No, because it's like I go off my gut. It's like being in a bad relationship. And then when you break out of it, you're suddenly, it's like a big concrete blocks off you. And you should sleep better. And so once I fixed that novel, like came to the realization that the night always comes will be this really fast, intense ride, then the book kind of just wrote itself and it fixed itself. Um, but it was hard to get there.
Does your editor see that full draft with all the bad turns first, or no?
Oh man, no, that's one of the things. I don't show anybody any of it until I've already really got it nailed down as much, for a couple of reasons. One, I'm insecure, and I don't like if my editor or my wife goes, look, I really don't like Bob, that character Bob. I hate that guy. And he might be the best character in the book after a few drafts, and he might save the book. But if she doesn't like it, or my editor didn't like it, and I didn't really understand the story yet, I'd cut him out like that day without even thinking about it, because I'd want to please him. So I try to have them buttoned down as much as possible. So then when they say, look, why is Bob in there? He's a horrible character. Then you can say, I put him in for these reasons. And you're right, maybe he is a bad character. And then you can pull him out easier because you just kind of know what you're doing and you know the story. So they're easier to fix once you know why you're writing what you're writing. So, I'll sit on the same story for 3 years without showing anybody.
Oh.
3-4 years sometimes.
And how long were you working on The Night Always Comes?
I think three.
Wow.
3.5. And then I showed one earlier version of it when it broke into two parts. So it was maybe 400 pages, 450. And to my wife, and she read it, and we were having a drink, and she was just asking me questions, and just by her asking me questions, I knew it wasn't working.
Yeah.
And so I mean, this is a lame story, but with Don't Skip Out on Me, I had a whole other story going along with it. It was 300 pages or something. And I'd taken almost 2 years on that side alone. And I was playing a gig, and my hands started shaking, and I'd go to my drummer, who I've been playing with for over 20 years. And I go, man, something's wrong with me, man. I go, look at my hands shaking. It really was shaking. And I'd had a couple drinks in me already, and I was still just like rattled, and I couldn't breathe. And he goes, what's wrong? And I go, I think I got to cut 350 pages. And he started laughing. He's like, you're upset over a fucking story? Like, get over it, man. Who gives a shit? I thought something serious was going on. And so I cut the next day. I cut out, like, we were in a van driving to the next gig, and I just cut that whole 350 fucking pages out, and then rebuilt the whole novel again. Is what Don't Skip Out. And I started sleeping better, and my life, and then the book took care of itself, and I really liked the book. And so I just, I'm not the best at it. I make a lot of bad mistakes, but my gut always tells me when to fix them.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel you. I feel like I'm just banging my head on a keyboard these days.
So how many pages you got?
Um, maybe like 70 pages.
Yeah.
But it's mostly just 70 pages plus probably hundreds of pages of notes that I'm just trying to figure out what to do with. And and a lot for me, I think like 80% of writing is either running or playing the guitar or reading a book, and then or thinking about one sentence for 3 days and going, you can't start this section like this. And but once once it actually happens, then I'm like, okay, now everything is going to be fine. And I needed those 3 days of frustration to break through into something else.
I mean, it's a long it's a long game. You know,
Yeah.
you can't rush it. I think some guys can. I mean, some writers can just throw it all out, like do 15-hour days and get it. Like,
Yeah.
but I'm not that guy. I have to take big breaks too. And I mean, and then there's days like, man, I'll edit. It'll be like 11 at night, and I'll be like getting ready to go to bed, and I'll just look at this one sentence that was bothering me, and then I'll edit for like 4 hours, and those edits will be brilliant, right? Like they're like, I'm like, God, maybe I'm not so dumb.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm not losing my mind. And then that won't happen again for weeks. And I might get up at the morning at like 8 in the morning and edit for 5 hours a day. And all those edits suck for like 2 weeks. But I just had that one window of like 4 hours where I was cooking. And I've gone through every kind of like trying to figure out why I can't figure this shit out. From like I said, man, you see me when I'm looking good or jogging, it's just because I'm trying to beg somebody to give me some kind of brain cells so I can figure it out.
Yeah. um, I think it's really, really interesting. The night always comes being so focused on this idea of home, and it really does. I think when upon kind of reflecting on it, I feel like you've been writing about that theme in various ways, just especially in songs. I was sort of thinking about songs this morning. I was thinking about Allison Johnson. I was thinking about Willamette, Exit 194B. These are all kind of where like a home or the wanting of a home. A home is like something people are longing for, or the home is this kind of dysfunctional place that brings some comfort but also doesn't. And I just thought it was a really interesting kind of juxtaposition with the stuff that's going on, with The Night Always Comes.
I mean, I think I grew up in a generation, I guess, or that where the American dream meant home ownership. Like if you owned a house, you weren't a bum. You had security. Like my grandfather always said, there's only one reason to be rich, man, and that reason is so some other asshole can't tell you what to do. And so I thought of that as like just having power for yourself. If you have a house, if you own a house, then there's theoretically, then you're your own boss. You're not going to have a landlord telling you you can't cook this kind of food or you can't have this or that. So to me, when I was 35, I bought a $70,000 house in Portland, and by the time I was 35, I'd saved 20 grand to buy the house. So I was a house painter, and so all I had to do is get a $50,000 loan. But this is before The Big Short,
Yeah.
that stuff, and it was really hard to get the loan. But I remember I broke into once I got the loan, I was going to get the keys in 3 days, and I couldn't fucking handle it, and I broke into the house so I could just sit in it, and then I was like, man, when I got the house, I disconnected my phone at 10 o'clock at night so I wouldn't get tempted to go out drinking. I bought a cookbook, and I mowed my lawn. I actually started kind of liking myself, and I was really proud of it. And it was a 480 square foot house next to a mini mart on a busy street, but it meant a lot to me. And so I was really interested in that because as a kind of like, just working class guy, I could afford this really cool old house in Portland, which is, a great city. And now that no working class people could, maybe a working class husband and wife that have decent jobs, and then they're getting some money from their grandparents or something, can afford that same shitty little house. And it just was such a big shift. It's so fast in Portland, and all over the West, and all over a lot of big cities in the U.S. That it was a subject that I wanted to try to at least put my spin on.
Well, I think it's an amazing book. We have about 10 minutes left. We have some questions here that I want to get to before we run out of time here. The first one: do you feel like you fixed the car by the time the novel is published, or are there any finished works you'd like to go back and keep tinkering with?
Well, by the time I send them out, I love them. I'm in love with them. The way I look at it, you just got to be in love with it at the end. At some point, when you hand it off, you're in love with it, and you're like, well, even if people hate it, I'm going to be proud of it. Now that that attitude might shift in 3 years because you've changed. You know, I've written some songs or records that I think that I really liked when I put them out, and then as I get distance from them, I'm like, Jesus, what the hell was I thinking? I'm crazy. Uh, with novels, I don't go back and reread them, but the heart of them, I love the hearts of all my novels. Like what I was trying to say, I love them. Whether they're good or bad, I don't know. And looking back at them, I'd probably change a lot of stuff just because I've changed and my editing ideas have changed and where my head's at has changed. And musically, definitely, because I'm a different person. But if I'm in love with them at one time, when I hand them off, I got to be in love with them. Like I got to be willing to jump in front of a bus for them, kind of thing, or just admit, hey, I wrote this story. It might be a bad story, but I believe in it. Then after that, I just turn to the next thing and don't look back.
The next question is, do you have a particular character that haunts you or has stuck with you more than others?
There's a guy I wrote about in Don't Skip Out on Me named Horace Hopper, and he was like a really kind of messed up, really cool kid. And he's my favorite guy, and I think about him all the time. And he just saying his name makes me tear up because I liked him so much. So yeah, it's really interesting. I always try to write about people that I could live with for a couple years. Like I'm not strong enough mentally to ever write about, like, nor would I want to, a serial killer or somebody like that, because life's short and I don't want to be around that kind of person. I want to be around people that I believe in, at least to some degree. And Horace Hopper he's always going to be probably my favorite because I just like the kid so much, and he just broke my heart.
I think there's also some great side characters. I really like Lonnie in Lean on Pete. Right, he's the guy with no teeth.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, yeah, man.
I've always wanted to see him, sort of show up again.
I wrote a novel about him. It's just not that good. I've written it, like, yeah, I spent a couple years writing a novel about him that I like, but I don't think it's that good.
And I kind of had a soft spot for, in the new book, for Cody. He's kind of a piece of shit, but you sort of feel bad for him.
Yeah.
He gets what he kind of deserves, but at the same time, you think he's gonna do like something really good, and then at the end he's just as greedy as everybody else.
Yeah, he's a grifter,
Yeah.
he's a low level kind of like opportunist. And I did write a bunch. I wrote where he talked a lot about different crimes he'd done, but it was just it was too much. But yeah, he's like definitely not the guy you'd want to be a roommate with, say.
Yeah. Um, this is another kind of related question. Do you have characters that you carry on in your mind or creative process after you finish their story? So is anybody? I mean, I think with a lot, with some of these endings, um, I'm always thinking like, what are those folks kind of doing now? But I imagine that maybe for you, you've got a million different scenarios you could have put them in, or maybe you do.
I mean, I think it's weird. Like the Frank Flanagan from the Motel Life, my first novel. I think about him a lot because he's probably the most autobiographical guy. He's more of a brooder and and battles booze and the darker side of life. So like at certain times I'll think about him. The only guy I never think about is the kid in Lean on Pete, Charlie Thompson, just because I don't want that kid to grow up and get beat up by the world, because I feel like he's just been beat up enough, and I got him to a decent spot by the end of the story, and I just want him to stay there. So I intentionally never think about that kid because I just want him to stay at that age with his aunt and happy. I don't want the world to, being alive, you're just going to get beat up. Good things are going to happen, of course, but the brutality of humanity, it can't help but sink into you. And I didn't want that to happen to that kid.
Yeah. All right, and our last question here is any tips for finding inspiration again when you feel stuck in what you're writing?
I mean, I think you just you watch you watch tons of good movies and you read as many good novels as you can and listen to a lot of music and don't think about being inspired and just think about what moves you in each piece. So say you see a movie and one character just really moves you and you can't stop thinking about that one character, then that feeling is where you should be writing, you know? So I think if you admit who you are to yourself and what really interests you, and what keeps you up at night, I think then inspiration isn't going to be a problem. It's harder when you're out on thin ice, like when you're writing a story that's more of a story to you, like more of like you don't know the world that well, or you're not emotionally invested in the world. Then it's easier to get in a ditch and harder to get out of the ditch. Um, I guess that'd be my, my only take on that one.
I mean, you've talked to me before about, I mean, how kind of heartbreaking the writing process can be for you, right? When you get up in the morning and you go, oh man, what's going to happen to Allison Johnson today, or what's going to happen to Lynette? Is that kind of when you're sort of in your zone, when you feel like you're that committed to a character?
Well, yeah, and I think it just shows you. Uh, I mean, kind of, I guess, where that I am a little bit dented because I do write I write really kind of sad stories. I think they're just like working class stories, but there is darkness, but I don't feel like they're dark when I'm writing them. When if you told me like if you said, man, I just wrote this book called The Night Always Comes, and you told me about it, I'd be like, Jesus, man, are you all right? Uh, but when I'm in it, it never seems dark because I guess the only story that really broke my heart was Don't Skip Out on Me, where I was just like
That
I
that
was in
broke everybody's heart.
I was in a taqueria next door and I was talking to this buddy of mine. And I just we both started crying over Horace Hopper. Uh, so yeah, I'm in the zone, and then some of them, but some of them like that one really wrecked my head. And Lynette was hard because she's done some things that weren't so great. And there's a part in that book where she's with her first like real boyfriend,
Yeah.
and the way she kind of dismantles him.
Oh, the ending, like when she runs into the brother in front of
Yeah.
the food, that's like just fucking it kills you.
Well, yeah, it's like I think everybody's been in those situations when somebody who isn't damaged is hooks up with someone who is damaged. I mean, they bring you to the dark side, and you don't. A lot of people don't understand like having lived the hard life,
Yeah.
and then you open them, and if they fall in love with you, and then all of a sudden they see the dark side. It's brutal. It can be, and it's kind of cruel as well. And I don't think I think in that story, she really she wanted to know how to love, and she wanted to be normal, and she just couldn't, and she
Yeah.
didn't understand it. And the cost was she kind of traumatized this pretty cool dude, this her pretty cool boyfriend that had no idea what going out with somebody that's mentally ill is like.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Our last question, promise before we let you go. How do you feel about the movies made from Motel Life and Lean on Pete?
I mean, I like them both, and it's just I made a decision early on, which is not to get involved with them because I'm too thin-skinned, I think, and I'm not smart enough to navigate that world. And I think there's so many moving pieces in movies that you could waste your life chasing them. And I've always loved the novel more. So that being said, I made a decision to just have fun. So it was fun. You know, Andrew Haig, who directed Lean on Pete's, a really cool guy. I paid off my house on it, and got people treated me nice. And I got taken out to dinner a few times. Uh, so I don't take it seriously because I don't have anything to do with it, and so it'd be mean of me to complain about it, and have given up all the power on it. So it was fun. You know, the one that was shot in Reno, they shot it in a lot of the places that I grew up going to. So I mean, it's just a laugh. It's a laugh. You just hope to God you don't lose. It's you hope to God that it does all right for them. You don't want to ruin anybody's career with your story.
No, I'm waiting to see you in a cameo in one of these films.
Yeah, I've been in I'm in both of them a little bit, but I'm horrified by
Oh,
acting.
where I didn't see you in either one. Where?
Oh, I'm just in like I'm in the bar scene,
Okay,
but I'm so horrified. Like I get so nervous and feel like such an idiot at any kind of like where people are fake acting or whatever. I
yeah.
guess it's all fake, but that it like I nearly have a fucking heart attack, man. Like, I was in there just in the bar, just going, "This is ridiculous. We're not really here. We're acting like we're here." And I know that's a pretty basic idea of fucking movies, but it wrecked my head so much I couldn't. I mean, I just couldn't. I couldn't imagine a worse fate than being an actor.
Well, I'm gonna have to go back and see if I can find you in those films.
No, don't, man. You got better things to do.
Well, Willie, it has been a pleasure as always. The new book is called The Night Always Comes. You can pre-order it now on Amazon or wherever you get your books from. Will be out in April, I believe. Is that
Yep,
correct?
April 6th.
It's an amazing book. I really enjoyed it, and I just want to thank you so much for joining us.
Oh man, thanks for having. It's so good seeing your face and talking to you. And hopefully we can talk again where you talk about yourself and we don't talk about me.
No, this.
Because I want to hear about all you're doing, but we can do that privately.
All right, man. Well, thank you so much.
Yeah.
Okay, you take care.